Well, this is the Big Friendly Swim podcast. I'm the Big Friendly host, and today's guest is the head coach at Chapman University. Coach Jay, how are you?
Good. Sorry, my dog is making a
Dogs are always welcome.
yeah, I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, walk me through your history as a coach. Like, what various coaching positions have you held, and how do you feel each one set you up for the next one?
Oh boy, I've had a lot now. I started at my alma mater at Occidental College. And that's really where I was like, you know what? I think that this is something that I really want to do. It was sort of a weird year for us because we had an interim head coach, and so things were kind of like in flux in some ways. So that was kind of a challenge, I would say. But it was really, it was a really good experience overall. Um, so then I went to work still in our same conference at CMS. The previous head coach had like swam there, and so I kind of got, emailed the head coach, and we ended up having like an hour and a half long interview just because like we just kept chatting. And I was like really wanted to be impressive. And so like he was like, "Oh, do you have any questions?" And so I just like kept rattling off like question after question because I was like trying to like, be cool or whatever and like look like I knew what I was doing and that I was engaged and all that kind of stuff. And so then I was there like full time for I think 3 seasons. And then I got a job as an English teacher. And throughout this time, I was coaching CrossFit. I was coaching a master's swim team in West Hollywood, which is the West Hollywood Aquatics, which is the first LGBTQ plus master's team in the country. If you haven't seen Light on the Water, it's a documentary about West Hollywood Aquatics. I would highly recommend it. Little drop in there. And then so then I also coached. I was assistant coach for a couple of high school teams. I was so like yeah, I've done. And then I coached at summer camp at the University of Texas. Oh, so I mean, there was a lot of coaching. I like to say that I've coached everyone from ages 8 to 88. And I mean, prob now it's probably like 9 to 90 or something like that. But it's been a lot of fun. And I think every little piece gave me different experiences. So I think my time at Oxy made me realize that I really that coaching is what I wanted to do and coaching is what I loved. And my time at CMS, I think was like really the first time that I had felt like at home somewhere other than actual home. I really felt like I was listened to and I was respected and like that I was making change and that felt really, really positive. And the coach that works there, Charlie Griffiths, he was an amazing mentor. And I think that he believed in my capacity and my competence in a way that like many people hadn't in the past, right? I mean, just with between sexism and homophobia and just being a young coach, right? Like ageism, a little bit of all that. It just like really felt so inspiring and invigorating to have someone who was just like, okay, yeah, you can be in charge of that. And like, checked my work and stuff, but like a normal, like not micromanaging kind of thing. And always like listened to my ideas and really considered them and everything. And that's where I also became like a really good recruiter. Um, at least what I think a really good recruiter. I guess I'm tooting my own horn a little bit, but I think I'm a really good recruiter. But West Hollywood reminds me that because, when you're a master swimmer, like you're not doing it because you want to like, go PRs and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
some of us do, but if you are a historically swimmer, right? If you swam in college, like by the time you're a master swimmer, you're not going to be getting PRs. So you're doing it because you love it, right? And so it reminds me every time I go that swimming is supposed to be fun and you're supposed to enjoy it, and that not every single minute of practice has to be like hyper serious. So I think that those are like my biggest takeaways was remembering about swimming being fun, remembering that I am competent and capable and like a bit of a badass and that I can do all the things. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
You know, I'm definitely gonna check out that documentary first of all, and I'll like if there's a link to it or if there's an easy way for people to get to it, I'll put that link in the description of the video.
That's awesome. I think it's on Hulu still.
Okay, then yeah, I'll put the link to it on Hulu in the description. If my timeline is right, it was when you were at CMS or like towards the end of your time at Occidental, but you received the Gene Freeman Scholarship, which coincidentally another guest on this podcast has also received it. I think you might know him. The CSU East Bay head coach Shane Pelton also
Oh yeah.
received it. What did it
Yeah.
mean for you? Because you talked about like coaches who kind of wrote you off as being too young or having a little bit of sexism, a little bit of ageism, or a lot in some cases. Um, what did it mean for you to receive an award given to just six assistant coaches like across all levels of collegiate swimming?
Yeah, I mean, it was an honor, honestly. I think that obviously in sport, like there's been such a huge discrepancy just in how people are treated. I mean, swimming has a history of exclusion, not inclusion, right? From segregation to, fear of gay people and spreading HIV through the water, and there's, just obviously misinformation, disinformation
Yeah.
agenda. And so I think that to be an agent of inclusion, to be viewed as somebody who's doing good work for gender equality, gender expansion, and just like and power, and seeing that and being recognized for that, I think was something that was really validating because I don't want to be a coach who just like chills with the status quo. I really want to be a coach that believes in parity and brings our sport to the next level and make sure that like our sport is a space of inclusion in a variety of different ways. So I mean it was truly an honor and it was really exciting to do. And actually, the same year that I got it, and this I think really speaks to what I was talking about, Charlie being a good mentor. A CMS grad got it the same year that I did. So I think that Charlie is clearly doing something within the program to, at least move, help foster that type of development in coaches.
I feel like Charlie probably felt a big sense of pride of like these are two people that I worked with and that I helped bring up that are winning this award now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for him, but that was like one of the few times that I asked him to take a picture with me and he didn't like roll his eyes at me. He's not a picture guy. So it has nothing to do with not wanting me in the picture, but he is not a picture fan.
So on the coaching side of things, and this is a fun question that I always ask any like D2 or D3 coaches that I talk to. California in general is dominated by a lot of D1 schools.
Mm.
Like if I mean I have no basis to make this statement, but it is probably one of the states in the United States that has the most D1 schools of anybody. So, with that in mind, how do you plan out your season's competition?
Well, that's a good question. I think that like, yes, we do have a lot of D1 programs in our state. And also some of them are D1s that D3, like the high level D3s can compete with. So when I was at CMS, for example, we raced against Cal Baptist and UCSD, who I think was Division 2 at first, and then may have
Yeah,
moved
they
to.
recently made the move over to D1.
Yeah, so we still raced them even when they became D1, but we did start like having the relationship with them when they were D2, so maybe that's and we also raced against LMU, which, sadly obviously got rid of its program. So I mean I think that one of the things that I want to do is like get my athletes to realize that just because we have D3 and like doesn't mean that we can't compete against two or one. We've competed against Division II schools. Like last year, we competed against Biola and Concordia, and there's varieties of talent levels at all different levels. So I think that on the one hand, it's a little bit challenging because really we have like the SCIAC, which is our conference. But we have really good I mean, our conference is really deep. I mean, we have Pomona and CMS who are, I think both got top 15 on both genders at nationals. And then, you have Kalu who had two swimmers at nationals. You have Laverne, who has, historically had really good swimmers, maybe has a smaller team now. Redlands has a history of national champions, so, maybe some of our teams are growing and learning right now, but I don't know. I think we have really good competition. So I kind of just reach out to whoever and kind of see what I can get. I mean, we even have like really good junior colleges. So we've raced against Mount Sac. I mean, so I think there's a lot of really good competition that if you just look at D1, D2, D3, you're really missing the nuance of the abilities that you have to like find good racing anywhere. Also, I do think that there's benefit in going into a meet and just getting crushed, right? Like
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
you walk in and you're like, yeah, like, at CMS, like we were like, oh yeah, like we're probably going to lose to UCSD like pretty bad. But how do the athletes respond to that? And so like I think that that is also like a huge benefit. So I think if that looking at it as more of what are the opportunities that we can have regardless of what the school is classified as.
I swam for a junior college. I swam for Las Positas. And I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. Let me just.
No
I,
problem.
I always text my family. I'm like, I'm in an interview. I tell them I'm in an interview, and they call me anyways, and they come and, like, it's okay. Um, I swam for Las Positas, and a number one thing that my coach, Jason, would strive for is to have us race against much better schools than we were prepared for. So, like, we
Exactly.
raced against Mount Sac, who was a better team than us. We raced against Sierra College, which was a better team than us. And then we'd come back to our conference and we'd do very, very well. Because we were
Right.
racing outside of our conference against teams that were better. So I definitely think that there is huge benefit in racing teams that are faster. And I think especially now, I'm not sure how much you were following like men's nationals for D1.
Yeah.
Especially now, there are athletes who are proving like you don't need to be from a top five D1 school in order to have a successful swim career.
Yeah. No, you don't. I mean, I think that a lot of it is the mentality and like how you approach it. And if fall in love with a school, um, that has a coach who like obviously you have to have a coach who's at least like wanting to get you there, right?
Yeah,
Not saying that like I think every coach has the capacity to get someone to go where they want if that's something that they're driven to do as well. So that means that they have to be like up to date on all the things. But if you find a school that you're really in love with, there's so many different avenues to get where you want to be. And like so yeah, go for it. And I think that I agree with you. I think that is really exciting. And you saw that at D3 nationals too. I don't know how much were paying attention to those because they were at the same time as D1. So, it's you definitely see like all of a sudden you're like, oh, like there's a kid from this one school is the only swimmer there, but they're doing really good stuff or whatever. So, I mean, I think that it is really fun.
when I was watching the guy that comes to mind, I interviewed him a few weeks ago. His name is Brian Benzing. Swam out of Towson, which is a
Mhm.
school not known for its. I mean, they've had like in the past like 5 years, they've had like one other guy qualify for like D1 nationals and make an A final. But he comes in and gets second in the country in a 50.5 in the 100 breaststroke and loses only to an NCAA record. And the number one thing that he told me that I think I mean is true for whether or not you're at D1, D2, D3 nationals or at NAIA junior college is he was there alone and he still felt like this sense of pride in representing his team, which I think is just such a fun like obviously there's merits to going to a top 5 D1 school and there's benefits you'll get out of it, but I think it's so much fun hearing about people who don't have the either like the traditional success story of I swam for Cal and I was a 3-time NCAA champion.
Yeah. I agree. When I was at Oxy as an athlete, I had a teammate who was the only one who went to nationals, and he was a national champion in the 200 breaststroke, Stephen Van Deventer. So, um, yeah, I mean, it really can happen from anywhere, and you can be the only one and still like be doing all the things. I mean, you can in something about like breaststroke, right? Like you can be training breaststroke against a backstroke or a butterflyer in practice. Like,
Yeah.
there's always ways to race and be engaged in practice and be getting faster, even if you are the only one. That's a nice thing, something I think is like really cool about swimming. It's like you don't necessarily, if you're the only one on a football team or whatever, right? And if you're a really great quarterback, you do need people who can like catch the ball,
Yeah.
right? So you can't really be the only one in some of these team sports. Whereas with swimming, the way that our training happens is you really can be kind of the only one at a school and still make really amazing strides in swimming.
I had a good friend of mine coming out of high school was not necessarily fast enough to be D1, but it was like the thing that he dreamed of for like his entire club swimming career. And it was the UNLV head coach who took a chance on a guy who was like 20.5 in the 50 freestyle, which
Right.
at this point in time is like 20.5 is not a D1 school time.
No.
Like um took a chance on him, saw how hard this kid was working, and now like this year he missed qualifying for nationals by like 2/100ths of a second. He went like 19-1, and like in long course he's been like 22-4. So I think it's also a testament to like no matter where you go, if you find a coach who's going to be the right fit for you,
Right.
no matter what division you're at, you can have a successful career. I mean, I think there's so many examples. I think to like Andrew Wilson, he was famously like the first D3 athlete to make an Olympic team.
Yep. His story was really fascinating too. He was a walk-on at Emory. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't even recruited for a Division III school. And I remember watching him break those records. I was coaching at the time, and it was like everybody was standing on the bleachers and like watching, and you would see like he would take a turn, and like the entire like everyone was like looking at the scoreboard, like, oh my God, what was that split? And like as he was nearing like the 50 point, you could like it was like New Year's Eve, like people were like counting down.
Yeah.
And we were just like all holding our breath. Like that was just one of the most exciting races. Like and just like moments in D3 history. So yeah, absolutely. You can go anywhere and be anything. I mean, to some extent, obviously. But if you find the right spot for you, like, the sky's really the limit.
Yeah, oh definitely. So talk to me about your competitive swimming career. You swam at Occidental, and what life lessons do you still carry with you? Like, what did you learn from that competitive swimming career that you've brought into your time as a coach?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Well, my first year at Oxy, I had one coach and then he ended up having to leave because his dad got sick. And then I had a different coach for the last 3 years. So I think that one of the important life lessons is like, you should still go to a school that you really truly love and make sure that your coach, even if they're young, even if they say they want to be there forever, theoretically they could leave. Like Chapman swimmers, like I'm not going anywhere. If you're hearing this, like I pinky promise, like I'm not, like nothing's gonna make me leave. But he couldn't plan his dad getting sick, right? So
Yeah.
he ended up leaving. And so I think that that's definitely one of the life lessons too, is just like things can change, right? Like, whatever. Um, and I did really, really, really good my first year. Like I had never gone under 2 minutes before in the 200 freestyle, and I went like a 153. So I was pretty stoked by that. And actually that race like is something that I'll just remember forever. I went like a 155 or something like that in prelims, which I was still pretty stoked by because, like I said, I had never been under 2 minutes. And I
Yeah.
think I was like second in the conference, like going into finals at night. And my coach gave me some good tips and stuff, but I was behind the walkout song was also Katy Perry's Firework. So I had a little like, yeah, I am a firework kind
Pretty
of
good
moment.
walkout song.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I didn't choose it, but it was great. I liked it. It was fun. So I walked out to that. And I don't know, I was swimming and I don't know how to explain this in any other way, but my mom died when I was in high school and when my senior year. And this was the first big meet that I had had without her. Um, and I swear to God, I could hear her cheering for me. Like, I don't know what it is, but it was just like the whole swim was something that just felt like I could feel it in the moment of being big for me. Like there's not that many moments in life when even when you're doing good stuff that you're like, wow, this is like you feel lighthearted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got to the wall and I just like started like I burst into tears. And I to this day I feel a little bit bad for my competition because I feel like they probably thought that I was crying about my time or something like that. But I was, or like, that I didn't do good enough. And I was like the complete opposite. I was like crying, just like tears of joy. And like the fact that I swore to you, I could hear my mom cheering. Like, um, so I don't know if that's really a lesson, but it's something that I'm like grateful for. And something that I never felt again in my college career. Not just her cheering for me, but just that that feeling while I'm racing, the sort of like in your body but out of your body and like this like serene, just like kind of feeling. Like I never felt that again. And I also never went faster than that. So I think that helps me a lot. Like I wish that during that time, like I had had more access to like sports psych or like that there was just more conversation happening around mental health. Like, and that's not anything against my coaches. That was just the time, right? And I think that my coach at the time, like he was awesome. Like, and he really cared about his athletes and their well-being. And if you like needed a day, like, then you could have that. But still, like the access to like those resources, the mindfulness and all that, it was a thing, but it wasn't talked about really. Um, and I wish that I had more of that. And so that's a big lesson that I learned bringing into my coaching. So we talk about mental health a lot. That's a big thing for me. And we have done work with a sports psychologist. We bring in people to talk about mental health and mental well-being. Um, because I think that obviously we all need it as human beings. Everyone has mental health and everyone can use help on anything and everything. So that's our biggest kind of I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from my college career is that implementation of those well-being things.
I remember at like the 2022 World Championships, people being like blindsided by when Caleb Dressel famously like dropped all his events in the middle of the meet and just went home.
Yeah.
And like remember like kind of feeling like crazy because everybody was like, okay, the swim comment section is not everybody, but they were all like losing their minds, being like, why'd he leave? He doesn't support his team, yada yada yada. And it's like when you're compared to Michael Phelps for like 4 straight years, and when that's all people think you are, and that's all people like tell you are.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being very happy that somebody of such a big name in our sport was taking some time off for their mental health.
Yeah.
Because it showed everybody like this is the benefits of what it can do. Because now he's back and now he's swimming like faster than he was before he took that break.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was the same with Simone Biles in the
Yeah.
Olympics, right? Like people were, you know, and Naomi Osaka in tennis, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's exciting to me to see it kind of playing out like that. And also, I feel like the way, like you were saying, with like being compared to Michael Phelps, I think the way that we compare athletes, the way that we swimming should be competitive and all
Hmm.
sports should be competitive, but it doesn't have to be this like petty type of competitive where we're like putting like, making it like the Desperate Housewives or what,
Yeah.
or what is that like the Real Housewives. Like we don't have to like compare them and like set them up to be like reality TV. Like, why do we have to do the interviews like directly when they get out of the pool and they're at their most like out of breath? Like, why are we not prioritizing allowing them to like warm down and take care of their bodies? And like we can interview them in like an hour. And I remember actually getting into an argument with Brett Hawk on his Instagram because in a post about Caleb Dressel specifically, he had said that he was upset. Like this was when Caleb Dressel had just come back and done like his first race and like
Yeah.
hadn't talked to the press yet. And Caleb was like, or not Caleb, Brett Hawk was like, literally said like, talk to the press and man up. Those were his words, man up. And I'm like, you're literally telling Caleb Dressel to man up, like, first of all, let's just put aside the sexism and
Yeah.
problematic nature of telling someone to man up, right? But why is it that we, as consumers of sport, commentators of sport, podcasters, whoever, feel entitled to someone's time and energy and life? He is a swimmer. He gets up and he swims, and that's it. He doesn't owe us anything else, right? And he can speak when he wants, and if he does, and he doesn't owe it to us. But why do we feel like they do, that these athletes owe us something outside of the time, dedication, like all of the things that they are giving to the sport just by being in the sport, right? And I'm not saying that we should never talk to obviously I believe that we should talk to podcasters and that we should do all these things to help with the sport. And also we need to protect athletes and their mental health. And if they're not in a space to be talking to reporters or whatever, then like we need to respect that. We shouldn't be requiring this of athletes and to say, well, that's how sports are, or like the NBA does it, that, or tennis forces people at Wimbledon to talk whether they win or lose or whatever it is. And I'm like, that's not very creative. We can rethink how sport is, and like maybe swimming can just be better like than all these other sports. And we don't force Caleb Dressel to do these things. And we understand that he is, if he identifies as a man and he then that's enough. He doesn't need to man up any more than that. Like he doesn't
Yeah.
need medals to prove that. He doesn't need to talk to reporters about his mental health journey. And going on a mental health journey also doesn't make him any less of a man. So I was like, and I remember getting in a little tiff back and forth with Brett Hawk about it because I was just like, no, we're not going to be saying these derogatory things towards athletes just because they're not giving you the answers that you feel entitled to.
I used to think he was like a good interviewer. I used to like enjoy watching him, and then somewhere along the line, like he became a lot more like hateful. It seemed like maybe that's how he always was, but somewhere along the line, like something changed, and it made me really angry when people were like saying, like you said, like, "Oh, Caleb Dressel owes the press. He owes us an explanation." And it's like, no, he doesn't. If
Yeah,
he had left those world championships and he had never come back, he still didn't owe people an explanation.
correct.
Like,
I mean, exactly right. Yeah. And I think that yeah, I mean, it was a sad, and I mean, the same thing happened with Simone Biles, like I said, but and a lot of other athletes, but just to keep it in the swimming realm, for sure, like we don't, I don't know, we just don't, I don't understand why we just feel like entitled to these athletes, their minds, their bodies, everything that they're doing, like it's invasive.
What's hilarious to me now is that those same people, so like Adam Peaty also took a lot of time off. Christoph Milak also took a lot of time off. World record holders, Olympic champions, taking like a year off of swimming. I mean, not a year off of like actually swimming, but a year off of competing
Right.
and really like having a vigorous training schedule. And now Caleb Dressel's back, and he's been 50 point in the 100 fly. He's been 21 in the 50 free. Adam Peaty's back, and he's been 57 again in the 100 breaststroke. Christoph Milak's back, and he's made the Olympic team for Hungary again. Now all these people are changing their tune of like, oh my god, I'm so happy they took this time off. Oh my god, I'm so happy they did all this. And it's like, on some level, I know probably some of these people are realizing. Sorry, I know some of these people are realizing, like, oh, okay, I was wrong to feel this way. Or at least that's what I hope. But there's also, on some level, there has to be people who are, like, just trying to cover up for earlier. Of, like,
Yeah.
lambasting these athletes and being like, you need to give us an explanation. It's like, no, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's almost like having balance in your life and like not beating your head against a wall every single day and staring at a black line for hours and hours on end, for years and years on end, is like okay, right? So for some athletes who that is their happy place. That is their, that they find the grind is like good,
Yeah.
right? Like everybody's journey is so different. And so like if Adam Peaty needs to take time off, then Adam Peaty needs to take time off. And if I don't know, Katie Ledecky doesn't need to take time off, she doesn't need to take time off. Like that's her journey. That doesn't mean that she is a better athlete than, well, I mean, I would say she might be a better athlete, but you know what I mean? Like in just natural talent. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean like she's a better person or a better competitor. It just means that her journey in competitiveness is different. And I think that the more that we can respect people's differences and journey, not like across all things from race to gender to ability to, just training needs, like I think that we'd all be a lot better off to just like chill and let people be a little bit.
I think, like, in the case of, like, Katie Ledecky, I think she's just such a level headed person that, like, the pressure doesn't get to her. Like, when I interviewed her at Golden Goggles, I asked her, I'm like, what did it mean for you to win the 800 freestyle? Like, I think it was 6 or 7 times in a row at World Championships. And she straight up told me, she's like, oh, it was that many times? Like, she didn't even know.
Right. Right. She doesn't, she is, I think she's probably very good at like not doing the like comparison game of like all of her different times and stuff like that. I mean, I think that that's the type of mindset that you need to have in order to have a career as decorated and as long as Katie's career. I mean, I can't speak for her, obviously, but I think that her mindset works very well for her, and she obviously loves swimming a whole lot because she does a lot of it a lot of the time. And that's how she shows her love to swimming and to herself. But that doesn't mean that that's like the right journey for
Yeah.
everyone. And so I think that she would also be the first person to recognize that also. She would
Oh,
be
yeah.
like, no, like this isn't probably not good for everybody, but this is what works for me. And so I think, yeah, she's definitely built a little bit different in that way.
I mean, like, on like a swimming nerd level, the fact that she's the favorite in the 800 freestyle at 27 is crazy to me. The fact that she's the favorite in the 800 and the mile, and she's probably going to be the oldest competitor in that final, is just like stupid. It's awesome.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, I think like look at Dara Torres back,
Yeah.
how many years ago was that when she was like in her 40s? Like,
Yeah.
I like get it, whatever. And it's just another thing, like what it like who in the history of swimming could have potentially lengthened their career if we knew all the things that we know now. If we had maybe not done the garbage yardage situation that we as a
Hmm.
sport did for so long, if we rethought club swimming a little tiny bit to just be a little bit more loving and caring and not just like churning out athletes. Um, I think it would just be really interesting to see like thinking back on Natalie Coughlin or any of these swimmers who like if they hadn't been doing that yardage and if we didn't make swimming feel like a chore all the time, um how might we have 27-year-olds in more finals? Because like 27
Is
is
not that old in
young.
the grand scheme of things.
It is so young. I mean, look at Tom Brady. He was throwing a football,
Yeah,
a very contact heavy sport. I mean, granted, being quarterback is different, until he was like in his 40s. And he was good
yeah.
that whole time.
Like he
Like,
still went out on top.
yeah, he left and was just like, well, it's time. It wasn't
Yeah,
like his body was like, it's time. He was just like, I'm done, right? And that's probably what Katie Ledecky is gonna do too. She's just gonna be like, okay, like, I think I'm done now.
yeah,
She's gonna be good forever. Um, so I think it's really interesting because like when you say like, yeah, when I hear 27, I'm like, oh my gosh, young, so young and beautiful, like beautiful young. Like, keep going. Let's see if she can make it into her 30s if that's what she wants, obviously.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I feel like the way that we're training now is you're going to see swimmers get older and still be more at the top.
There's a swimmer from Chile who's I think 38 or 39. Her name is Crystal Kobrich. I think this is either going to be her fifth or sixth Olympics, and I think she's made like some a huge number of world championship finals. She made it this past February. She made it last year. She's won medals at the Pan American Games, and she swims like the 800 and the mile.
Right. Well, I think too, like, I mean, I think that people, like, as you get older, I feel like in some ways distance is a little bit, like, you're able to hold on to distance a little bit more than you are able to hold on to sprinting. At least that's what I feel like I've seen.
It's
And
interesting, like
I mean, Dara Torres is
yeah,
obviously proving me completely wrong. I again, and that could be like just new training and I don't know, but I feel like people assigned female at birth, it appears like there's been a lot more ability for distance to like be, distance swimmers to kind of go the distance, as it were.
it's interesting. I was talking about this with a friend the other day. Um, in like open water, the age tends to trend upwards. But in
Exactly.
swimming, as one gets older, typically you see them go down to shorter events. Like as
Mm,
Michael Phelps, I mean, I say older, he was like still in his late 20s, but like as he got older, he stopped contesting the 400 IM as much. He started going down like the 200 IM and the 100 fly, 200 like I mean, still brutal events, but like focusing on the shorter events. So, I mean, again, I have no basis for this. This is purely like just off of the limited data I've seen. But like it's typically seemed to me that like as people have gotten older in open water swimming, they've still had a lot of success. But as people have gotten older in swimming, at least recently, like Dara Torres, Anthony Irvin, like in Tokyo, like the silver and bronze medalists were in their 30s in the 50 freestyle. Um, like I don't know, it's a weird metric, and it's like one that I kind of want to sit down and like go through and figure out like data points of like how many medalists in each event in the past like 20 years have been in their 30s.
yeah, that would be really fascinating to see, honestly. I mean, again, like mine is pure conjecture as well. I mean, I think that, there's definitely I, I mean, Katie is showing that like her shorter events are not staying as competitive. And I think that with, like you said, with open water swimming, that shows that, older and more distant. So I would be very curious to see that
I
data.
might
So
have to do that
I
just for
am, I
fun.
am, right? Oh, yeah, that's how you should spend your free time for sure. Um, sounds like a real party. Actually, like my assistant coach is like very similar to you. He loves swimming data. So I actually think that like the two of you would should hang out and like do that as a little part-time project because I think, like I said, he loves the swimming data side of things too. So, I think that that would be really fun and interesting to find out. So we'll circle back after that, after you find that out.
At least for Katie Ledecky, I think of like Ariarne Titmus when she broke the world record in the 400 freestyle last year. I remember being surprised that people were surprised because apparently she was the oldest person, and not the oldest, she was like on average older than the average age that people would set the world record in that event. For like the last like 10 people have had held the world record. I'm like, she's like 24, maybe. She's 23 or 24. And people are like, oh my god, she's so old. Like, she probably could set the world record again this summer.
Yeah. I mean, if we would stop just like putting like, oh, well, this person's too old to do this or whatever, like then people would stop doing that to themselves,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel like I'm like even when I was like a senior in college, like I'm like, oh my God, my body's getting so old. Like it was 2022. Like, come on. No, it was not getting old. Like it may have been getting tired. And again, there's probably a lot of things that went into that, not just, not just training and all that, but it's like if I hadn't been told that y- it's it's like very hard to get faster as you get older in college, like I probably would have believed that I could have kept getting faster. And so I think that it's exciting to see people who are 24 and older setting world records and stuff and being like, age is just a number. And if you train and fuel your body for your body type and for your events and stop doing like just garbage yardage, then you can still be successful well into your 20s and
As
hopefully
a swim
30s
fan,
and hopefully 40s.
it would be hilarious. It'd be so awesome if Katie Ledecky broke one of her world records this summer. Because it would just shatter that ideology of like, you need to be in your early 20s or late teens in order to break a world record. It would just obliterate it.
Well, or they'd be like, "Oh, well, she's the exception."
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's always going to be something, but always find ways to kind of knock down or maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
Like knock people down and maintain the status quo, I should say.
It
So
definitely makes me
hopefully not,
happy though
but
seeing like people being more successful both on a personal level of like this is a person I've watched for so many years and I'm invested in them doing well, and both on like a swim fan level of it's fun having people seeing people have that longevity now.
yeah.
It's
Right.
just
And
fun to see.
it builds a fan base, right?
Yeah.
Like someone like Michael Phelps, of course, what he did at the one Olympics of winning 8 medals is like very exciting, obviously. Right? But I think that like him being able to build a fan base across 5 Olympics did good things for our sport, not just the one Olympics. Because if he was just in that one Olympics, right, he wins one, and then swimming's moment is kind of over.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, okay, he wins those medals and then he goes to the next Olympics and we get to see, okay, how many medals can he win now? Or like with Katie Ledecky and all of her times going to the Olympics. Okay, like can she break a world record, right? You're like, it gives you something to follow along because swimming we really only see every 4 years. Whereas something like football, which has a season every single year that we're following along, like you get to know, quote unquote, the players on your team, right? Like Tom Brady fans follow Tom Brady for a gazillion seasons, whatever it is. But even like with someone like Katie Ledecky, if you're not a swim person, if you're not you, me, coaching level,
Yeah.
you're not paying attention to every US Open, every, whatever meet, all those meets. Like you're not doing it. So, I think that that's something, the longevity of these athletes, that is actually doing a lot of good for our sport overall, because you get to carry your love all 4 years and be like, oh, okay, like, yeah, let's see what Katie can do now.
And I think like in cases like Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky and all of these athletes who have that longevity and that sustained success over like multiple Olympic games, like a 10-year-old Joseph Schooling was watching Michael Phelps in 2008 win 8 gold medals, and then 8 years was beating him for a gold medal.
Right.
Like stories like that are so much fun, and they build up the sport in such a positive way.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, it brings people in, brings people together for sure.
So tell me about the Fulbright scholarship, and if I'm right, if my like research was correct, that was related to your time in Germany. Like how did your experiences with that help influence your life moving forward?
Yeah. So my mom was born in Germany. And so when I was in college, I took some German classes and was trying to like find ways to get closer to her. And so when I was graduating, I was like, yeah, like let's just go out for this Fulbright scholarship and see what happens. So it was so a lot of the reason that I went there, and I was actually lucky enough to be placed in the same state as her birth. So it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun. But it was also one of the hardest years of my life. Like, not gonna lie. I mean, I grew up in Chicagoland area, where winter is atrocious. And then I went to college in California, obviously, Southern California, where I was spoiled with warmth and sun all year round. And so when I went to Germany and went back to like winter, basically,
There's a bit of
it
whiplash.
was, it was, it was, yeah, it was so hard. I mean, like, just, it was dark and gray, but then also just like feeling really like far away and kind of in this like limbo space of not knowing what my next step was going to be, which I mean, I'm sure so many college seniors out there can relate to that, right? And luckily when I was a senior, I knew I was going on this Fulbright scholarship, so I mine was delayed a little bit, and just being like, oh, well, I kind of didn't really want to go home or like really come back here to the States, but also like very much wanted to come back. And so I was in a really like weird emotional space. So I don't know. I think that it definitely gave me a lot of appreciation for what I have, for where I've been, and um, did make me feel closer to my mom, maybe not in the ways that I thought it was going to. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helped me, like I said, it helped me really appreciate where I am, and like the people who love me and the people in my life, and being far away from them was harder than I anticipated, because my family lives on the other side of the country from where I am now. So I'm like realistically, miles wise, Germany was not that different than California, but emotionally, just with the time change and all that, like it just felt so different. So it definitely, and it taught me to appreciate the value of home, having a space that I really felt like was home, and that I wasn't just in limbo kind of thing.
My older brother in the fall took a job in Dubai because he was just having such a hard time finding a job here.
Hmm.
And we recently went down and visited him. Like we literally came back like 2 weeks ago. And I remember exactly that feeling of like when we were all together. No, that didn't matter where we were, but when we were all together like in the same hotel room, it felt more like home than being in my house for 3 months and he wasn't there.
Right, right. Yeah, it's amazing how like how people can feel like home
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah, and I remember like just being in Germany, and every time like a dog would pass me, I'm like, "Oh my God, I want a dog so bad." And so when I got back to the United States, it did take me some time because my first apartment didn't allow dogs, but
It's a very cute dog.
yeah, and I have two now. They're both very and they know it too. So that's always a treat. So yeah, they're exciting little dogs. It's a good time. Yeah.
So my last question for you, and this is one that I like. After I wrote the question, I sent it to you. I didn't like how I worded this question,
Okay.
so I'm gonna reword it. So,
Okay.
as a fantastic swim coach who also happens to be genderqueer, how do you feel you've been uniquely equipped as an individual to inspire your athletes towards creating positive change? Because I've seen, so I did like, I do a fair amount of Instagram stalking of people that I'm going to interview. Like,
Hey, that's what it's there for.
yeah, like I try to ask everybody that I talk to at least something that they haven't been asked before.
Hmm.
And I noticed a lot of posts of your own athletes who talked about how much of a positive influence you were on them, and that was the inspiration behind this question.
I really appreciate that. So I mean, I will say that the first time that you sent me the question where you had put gender queer first in front of me, I did not mind that personally. I appreciate that you switched it to person first language because I think that there's a lot to that. And I think that that is really important. But I've told my athletes this before, and I've told, a bunch of people this, but I have friends who say the same thing. Like, well, I don't want to be a queer coach or a gay coach or a black coach or a, whatever, however you want to be defined, but I want to be a coach who is fill in whatever adjective, right? But I want to be a queer coach. Like, I want my athlete. First of all, I want to stand up for who I am, right? Sorry, my hair in my eyelash.
Oh no,
Okay.
you're good, no worries.
The dog next to me apparently is shedding. Right into my eye somehow. I don't know. But I want to be a queer coach. Like I not only want to, like I said, like stand up for who I am, but also for my athletes to see that it's okay for oh my gosh, for other parts of their identity to come first. That they are whole people and that they can be a queer athlete or they can be a Jewish athlete or a Palestinian athlete or a black athlete, Latine athlete. All these are athletes that we have on our team. And that it's okay for that to come first, that they are humans before they're athletes. And that I am a human and I am myself before I'm a coach. Like I deeply, deeply connect to my identity as a coach. And also at the same time, it is a job. So while I feel like it is a calling that I have to either teach or coach or be sort of that role in the world, I also don't want that to be the only thing that defines who I am. And so to your point, I think about being uniquely positioned to make change is between like working for West Hollywood, and all the different experiences that I've had in workplaces, I think I've realized that like I have a lot of privilege as well to use and leverage in some ways, and in other ways, try to take a step back that will help people, and will help make our sport and sport in general, ideally, a more inclusive space, a space that shows that people are appreciated and loved. And of course, that doesn't mean that we're not going to be competitive. Like, it doesn't mean that, there is an inherent exclusion to college athletics, right? 'Cause I only have so much pool space. So I can't take on every single
Yeah,
athlete who wants to come to my school. And also, colleges cost money. And especially if you're a D3, you're not getting out athletic scholarships. So you're relying on financial aid and all these kinds of things. And then, of course, the FAFSA is an absolute nightmare this year.
yeah,
Just a like, I don't even know. Um, and so I think that it allows, I was worried though too. I think it allows me to make change, but it also worries me that, people are going to see my email signature saying they, them, or they're going to look on my Instagram account and they're going to say, nope, I don't want to swim for that person. And of course, those aren't people that I want on my team. And so that's fine. But I was worried of what level is that going to be at? Like how, right? Like with the rhetoric in sport, there are very loud people who are
Yeah.
like, trans people don't belong and all this kind of stuff. So like, what is that going to look like and
Loud
feel?
people outside of D1 nationals who know nothing about swimming.
Girl, don't even get me started. Not even get me started. And that year, the CSCAA gave out oh, like two sets of awards for All Americans based on Leah Thomas swimming.
Oh, wait. What does that mean? Like, oh.
The College Swim Coaches Association of America that gives out like the
Oh,
All
they give
American
out.
award.
Why?
They like doubled it. So I don't remember exactly like what it was, but they somehow like gave out like multiple awards or something to like give them their due in other ways. So I can't remember exactly what it was because my brain tries to not hold on to that information too harshly, too closely, so
I'm
it
like
hurts.
half expecting like Riley Gaines to drop like a book in like the next year at this rate with the amount of time
Oh,
she spent talking about it.
absolutely. No, and look, at the end of the day, what we can all agree on is that those were the rules and
Yeah.
she swam by the
Yeah.
rules. Like I am in firm, like, let me just be very clear. I am in firm support of Leah Thomas swimming and that trans athletes belong in sport, period. End of story. Just want to make sure that that record is very clear. And also, even if you don't believe that, 100%, one, you're wrong. And two, you can be mad all you want, but at the end of the day, the NCAA had rules and
And
Leah
they were
followed them.
followed.
And
Yeah.
Leah followed them. And if you have a problem, do not attack Leah. Bring that to the NCAA. And also, there's just like the science, there's just not enough research on it, period, to show whether like that they're wrong. But there are studies that are coming out that are showing that they're wrong, right? But they're doing comparisons with like cisgendered athletes who have never undergone any hormonal changes and all that kind of stuff. So, like, I mean, yeah, okay, if you take like your average cis male and your average cis female, quote unquote, and you put them against each other, like, the chances are that the cis man is going to have some averages above that of the cis female. And it's just like, I don't know. It's just, it like, yeah, you can argue those things back and forth all day, but at the same time, like, the rules are the rules. And some of the rules suck.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
just in general.
I remember seeing a common thread that actually made a few good points of like pre-transition her best time was like 4:18 and how like post-transition best time was like 4:33 and how 4:33 would roughly be like the equivalent to like 4:09 in like the men's 500 comparing like similar time drops. I don't remember exactly what they said, but I remember agreeing with what they said of like, guys, it was just a slower 500 freestyle final that Leah Thomas happened to win.
Right.
That everybody was losing their minds over.
Everyone was really losing their minds. Like,
Like, it was crazy. I'm like, there are people
it's so
protesting
wild,
outside of a college swim meet.
right? Like, also,
Like grow up, go home.
do you not have anything better to do with your time? Okay,
Yeah.
we can, and then Nikki Haley
Oh
comes
my
in one
god.
of the GOP things and says that trans women in sport is the biggest threat to women in like right now.
When she's a bigger threat to women.
And I'm sitting here like, right? I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I can think of it like without even thinking for longer than 4 seconds, I can think of at least five things that are going to
Yeah,
be a bigger threat
yeah,
than trans women in women's sports. Just even if you believed that that is true, which again, I do not believe that it is, like there's just so many other things. Like, are you like I don't it just it blows my mind. But I think that there aren't very many out gender queer
yeah,
or non-binary or trans coaches in sport. And so I'm hoping that I can help make a change in that space, that people will see that it is possible to be who you are and be in sport and be respected for it. I feel very, very respected by my department on especially on like the DEI initiatives and stuff that I want to do. And even when I was like getting hired and we were talking about the background check and they were like, have you ever been like arrested at a protest or something like that? And they were like obviously completely joking.
yeah.
Um, uh, but I was like, not yet. Not yet, but we'll see. Um, and knowing that like, okay, like my activism is, something that they're gonna accept and
Yeah.
obviously within range. Like I'm not gonna like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna say what I'm not gonna do because like if the NCAA is coming out with NAIA like legislation, like I might be, and when I signed the letter that got sent by Athlete Ally and a bunch of other sports organizations in support of trans athletes in sport to the NCAA, and I forwarded it to my boss, and I was like, shouldn't be a problem, but I wanted to let you know I signed this. Like, you know, um, and he was like, okay, great. Thanks for letting me know. Great job for signing or whatever. So it's just, but I think if that passes, I probably have a very, very different opinion and try to find ways to be the best help that I can be. But it's been an honor to be able to fight for LGBTQ plus inclusion and also to hold conversations around other forms of DEI and again, mental health in sport that I feel like I can help and I can be a space and recognize that like we are full humans. Like you're not leaving your gender or your race or your sexuality or any other part of your identity at the door of my pool gate. Like, yeah, we want to say to athletes, oh, leave the drama, leave your feelings at the door. But like you can't leave some things at the door. And you shouldn't leave some things at the door because everything being a genderqueer person informs so much of how I move through the world and how I view swimming and how I feel when I'm swimming, right? Like I have trans athletes and friends who may have never tried swimming if they weren't able to put on a non a men's suit or a women's suit, right? Like as if those mean anything. Um, and so it's but I always loved the water. Like it didn't matter what suit that I had on, but the way that I feel on deck now versus when I was younger and the way that the rhetoric has been happening around being queer in sport, it just changes everything. It changes so much. So, and so then I feel like on some level, even though I'll never understand what it's like to be a Black athlete, for example, because of the segregation in our sport and because of the exclusion of LGBTQ plus athletes historically, I can more clearly understand how that could impact your movement in everyday life. And so I think that again, I may not understand, but I can make space for it. I can hold that and I can listen and try to move forward and find resources and make sure that we're diversifying our team, diversifying our coaching staff and whatever needs to happen in order to like make everything like a safer place in sport for people. So yeah, again, that was kind of a long answer to your question, but it's something I'm really, really passionate about and
Yeah.
could probably talk about for all day, every day. But I don't want to be quiet about all the things that are impacting student athletes.
You mentioned it early on of like the lack of non-male individuals coaching, and how there's like a majority male coaching staff on the scene when it comes to like every level of swimming. And like the other day, I was talking to my girlfriend, and she was like, I've noticed there's a lot more women swim coaches, and I laughed, like I audibly laughed, because I'm like, no, there's not. There should
Yeah,
be.
there definitely should be. Um, and but I mean, there's a lot of change that is happening. Like sort of the old guard is sort of retiring and moving out and all that. But it's still like a very much like an old boys club, you know? So it's fun, like as I like to wear like wild outfits to swim meets, and it makes me feel fun, and I think it brings my athletes joy, and whatever. And it's just like, I get to express myself and
Yeah,
be and have my vibes be what they are, right? But it's interesting, like seeing how male coaches react to it, like, and just being them, just kind of being like feeling like I don't belong there because of it, or being told that like wearing certain types of makeup is going to make my athletes like respect me less or whatever. Um, and I think it's interesting to be like, no, I'm going to prove all of you wrong. Like, I can wear whatever I want, and I'm going to bring athletes to nationals, and we're going to become all Americans, and I'm going to be a nationally ranked team before you know it. So we definitely need, but I think that in general, we definitely need just more diversity in our sport in general. And that is our responsibility to make that happen and make sure that like we need to talk about the history of swimming and diving, and we can't ignore that there has been that we're always like, I feel like people have made because men and women tend to train together, and because whatever, I think it's kind of been viewed as like an equitable sport, and I don't think that we have really reckoned with the elements of swimming and diving that have been really problematic and been really hard for people, whether that's, I don't know, sexual misconduct at Kentucky, or treatment of athletes at Cal, or overtraining, or all these things that happen. And we're just like, oh, well, that's just one bad actor. And it's like, yeah, but they learned from someone who learned from someone who learned from someone.
yeah,
And at some point, we have to say, you know what? Swimming maybe needs to reckon with some things, and we need to have these conversations. And why is it at the CSCAA like that all of the, like a lot of the awards, for example, like they're given to coaches who have been there for like 20 plus years, who have been coaching for 20 plus years. Okay, well, if you look at the barriers for women, Black coaches, non-binary coaches, Latina coaches to last 20 years in sport, like that's a lot of time and a lot of like mental difficulty that the white male coaches are just not facing. Period.
yeah,
Like, I'm not saying that's nothing, I don't, what, I'm not even going to couch that statement. It's just that's just the way it is. And so in some ways, just having the awards, well, oh, well, you have had to be in sport for 20 plus years, is in itself a kind of a form of sexism. And and so I think we need to like rethink how we're honoring coaches, how we're thinking about what makes a good coach, and um, really putting in the effort to have those conversations and make them at the forefront. Like, there's not a single DEI based topic at our college coaches convention this year. And a lot of them are about fundraising and recruiting, which are both very necessary things, but there's just not as much about culture building on teams. Like one talk, I think, about like mental health. I'm not I haven't looked through it, so I'm not like 100% completely, so I haven't memorized all of them. But Brett Hawk is doing 3 interviews with coaches.
I
But there's not a
my
single,
final
but there's
straw with him was when he complained about being kicked out of world championships despite the fact that he didn't have credentials to be there, and he was on deck trying to coach athletes. That was my final straw with him, where I was like, "Oh my god, I can't listen to you talk anymore."
mm,
It should have
yeah,
been sooner than
I
that,
can't
but
remember what my final straw was.
actually, it
But
might have been when
I
he
definitely
spoke out supporting
unfollowed him.
Israel. Might have been that too.
I don't follow him anymore. I stopped following him, and based on like some of, again, I think it was like probably gender-based comments and just people being like man up and like, you know, power to him. He has a big platform. He has reached people who didn't know much about swimming
Yeah,
before, and I will give him his due on that front. But the way that he goes about things and the way that I go about things are going to be very, very different. And yeah, I have not seen his support of any recent events, thankfully.
yeah. I unfollowed him a while back, and I have not really looked back.
No, I told my assistant that if he ever like, posts good stuff about, because he posts some good stuff about sprinting. So I'm like, if he ever posts some, good stuff, you just send me just the good stuff.
Yeah, he giving him credit where it's due. He is broadening the reach of swimming. That
Exactly.
is a
Yeah.
positive thing that he is doing. I
Yes.
just wish he was doing it in a way that was less inherently negative, in my opinion, at least.
I wish it was less cis het white male centric. Like
Yeah.
just like all of those vibes. You're like, okay.
If I see one more thing about Sprint Revolution, though, oh my god.
But they really should add 50s of elves.
Oh, they should. I want
That would
50s at
be,
the Olympics.
yeah, no, I'm in full agreement on that fact, at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
I mean, I would have loved getting to see Nicholas Santos win a gold medal in the 50 fly at age 45. Would have been amazing. Would have been so awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to bring anyone down on it, but I think I just want to be a source of light in the
Yeah.
sport and that we did it. And that when we call people out, we're calling them out because they're mistreating athletes, mistreating people, and we're not just calling people out because we don't like the way that they're doing
Yeah.
something. Yeah, like I will call out racism in sport. We will call out sexism in sport, but yeah, we'll see on that front. Yeah.
Coach Jay, thank you so much for talking to me. This was so much fun. I always love these longer interviews because I feel like it becomes way more of a conversation than just a back and forth. I ask a question, person answers with an answer. So I really appreciate you sitting down to talk to me. This was so much fun.
Well, I really appreciated you reaching out. I was, glad to be posting about, I think I was like posting about student activism and you reached out. And it's nice, to have conversations that aren't just based around swimming, but also
Yeah.
being like, how can we use these platforms for something larger? And so I appreciate the conversation and, be happy to chat again at some point and
Yeah.
really appreciate all the things that you're doing for swimming. So keep up the podcast.
I actually by the time we get off this interview, I may have hit 1,000 followers on Instagram
Okay, well,
as of recording. I was at 992 when we started, or 982 when we started.
Okay, well, maybe, if you post something about this, you might drop down a little bit, though, from all the people who don't want to talk about gender in sport or support trans athletes. So,
It's important. It has to be talked about. It's important.
yeah, absolutely. I always know I'm gonna lose followers or whatever, and I mean, I don't count my followers. The only reason I ever look at who's following me or who's not is to see if recruits are unfollowing me and if they're no longer interested, which is obviously fine. Um, so it is interesting to have conversations about it, and we need to be having more conversations about how all of the things in the world are impacting our sport and our athletes. Like
Yeah,
the student athlete experience, like how are people being impacted by the moment that we're in right now? It's big. It's a big moment.
yeah.
And you can't ignore what's happening anywhere, doing anything. So,
I mean, you were talking about like you got asked like jokingly if you'd ever been like jailed for like protesting. My cousin goes to Indiana University, and he spent a night in jail like last week, and now is banned from campus for a year,
wow.
which is absurd. Like,
That's really upsetting. Yeah, we actually, Chapman now has an encampment on campus that just started yesterday morning. And I I went and checked out to make sure that there were not going to be like riot police or anything
yeah,
like coming, just because like obviously like we live in Southern California, so everything that was happening at UCLA was right
it's like
there,
right down the road,
right down the road, and like
an
the
hour and a half away in LA traffic.
yeah, yeah, no, at least yeah. It's like 40 miles, but like 2 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, but like no matter what you believe, like students should have the right to speak and the right to exist and protest and all of those things. And that's like what our like First Amendment is all about. And that doesn't mean that the First Amendment doesn't say that like private institutions can't fire you for your for
yeah,
your and stuff like that. Um, so obviously I know that there are limits and it's more about what the government can do, but police are agents of the government. And so for it to, so I mean, my concern is always like, I don't want violence to be done against any student. And so I made sure I was like, I will put myself between me and a student. Like, no matter what they're there protesting for or against, they should be able to do that. So I feel like if I do get arrested, it's probably going to be putting myself between a riot police officer
yeah,
and a student. And I think that should be our role as the quote unquote adults on campus. Of course, the students are also adults, but still in a very much in a space of like learning and growing. And so, I mean, we should all be supporting our students for doing those things and supporting our athletes if they want to use their voice to support what they believe in.
yeah, definitely. I've thought about it many times, and I'm like, I'm a big enough person. I could probably like put myself in front of someone.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm big enough,
I'm very
but I,
scary to
but
people
I
if they
believe
don't know
enough.
me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I'm pretty thin at least, but I think I could just stand, right? And just be like, please
Yeah,
don't, please go. Um, but yeah, it's just been a really interesting time to be on college campuses
yeah,
and see how things are being reacted to and learning, relearning where our institutions' values are.
yeah. It's been a bit of a rough awakening, I think, to some extent, learning like what these institutions, what they really care about and what they really value, and how, for the most part, that isn't the students when it
I mean,
should be.
it's not their right to protest,
Yeah,
right? I mean, if you and I say this as like my mom like lived in in a encampment against apartheid in South Africa. Like I come from, I, even when I was like in middle school, I like had like a poster in my locker, on my locker, like against the war in Afghanistan or Iraq or whichever one America decided to start that year. Um, and like I've always been against war and have always protested it. And that comes from my mom, clearly. So I think, like, from my perspective, it's like, you know, these students are fighting against war. And they like that is completely a valid place to be. And yeah, I think the universities need to spend more time listening. I'll say I understand that divestment is potentially more challenging than a lot of the students may understand just because of how tied up so many companies are in various things. Um, and also, like, they still have the right to protest it, and we should still be striving to make sure that the world is a safe and equitable place. And
Yeah.
if that, like, I don't know. I'm just like waxing poetic now on my like little box, but I just and it also checking in with all of my athletes. I've been checking in on my Palestinian athletes. I've been checking in on my Jewish athletes because those are experiences that again, I will never have. And so I want to make sure that they know that I'm willing to hold that space for them, regardless of my beliefs, is that their experiences are valid and I can hold space for them and validate their experience without necessarily holding the same beliefs that they do. And finding ways to have those conversations that help us learn, grow, and become better people on both on all sides of it, and making sure that they feel safe with me and that they know that I love them and respect them no matter what their beliefs are. And that might be challenging for some coaches to hold that space, and so it's these really important moment for us to have that conversation too. Like, how are we holding spaces for these athletes when we don't agree with them and still recognize their humanity and our humanity?
I think that's so important. Like, even if it's somebody that you disagree with or that you don't, like, subscribe to what they're, like, protesting for or what they're believing in, like, it's important that people have that right and have that ability to go out and support something they believe in or support something they want to happen and not have fireworks shot at them.
That was so horrifying.
That's like, that's
Really.
insane to me that that was just like allowed to happen.
And the police stood there for
Yeah, like,
7 hours and let it
I
happen.
don't understand. How are you just like, yep, that's fine.
Yeah. That is a thing. And I will say, like, I don't really like I don't share my like exact political opinions with my student athletes. Like,
Yeah,
you'll notice that in this conversation I did not divest exactly or what my quote unquote political opinion is
yeah.
on it. But I am on the side of humanity, and that's what they need to know. Um on the side of life and liberty and freedom and love and care. And that if those are the things that we have in common, then we are on the same side, even
Yeah.
if we believe different things. Or so I get accused of being political a lot, because I've renamed my teams from men's and women's to low tops and high tops as like a sort of thing about their
That's pretty
students.
good actually.
Right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, like okay, let's, be something a little bit different. It's just a way to be gender expansive. Like, and I am the one of the biggest supporters of women in sports. So in no way do I want to erase women's accomplishments in sport. I want to highlight the amazing women that are on my team, while also recognizing that not everybody who competes in the women's category on my team identifies as a woman. And that's okay. And we can hold space for the fact that both the women on my team are doing freaking incredible things and are absolutely incredible. And also that I don't have just women, and that's okay. And that doesn't make me political. Again, I can be on the side of humanity, but I made a joke about like one day about, a student was stressed out and I made a joke about I was like, "Oh, capitalist labor is always asking so much of us." And they were like, "Oh my," I got like a anonymous feedback form about saying that instead of being a swim coach, I should be a politician. And I'm just like, this is about our humanity being
Yeah.
on the deck. And like, yeah, capitalism does require a lot from us and requires us to keep churning and keep churning. And that lives in our bodies and that impacts the way that we're swimming at practice.
For the
That's not
record,
not a
if that
political
was me
statement.
that had that said to me, I would have laughed.
I know. I like some of them did. And it's not all of my athletes,
Yeah.
it's occasionally one or two and this is the end of my second season. So it was likely someone that I did not recruit. And um and so that's important too, is like making sure that you bring in people who want to who want to be with you and who don't necessarily agree with all your opinions, but want to be a part of being more expansive with our sport. Like, if you don't believe that trans women belong in sport, like, you're not going to come to a team that has renamed their team low, tops, and high.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not going to happen. But it's been a learning curve for everybody. But it again, like, that's not, and to me, it's not politics. To me, that's not political. You don't know who I'm voting for president. Um, I don't even know who I'm
Neither do I.
Right? And I'm not telling you, oh, this is like, on my ballot, I'm voting for this thing or
Yeah.
that thing. Like, that is like the politics of it. This is the humanity side of it and how I believe that we should all be viewed as full human beings. So,
I think
anyway,
that's something that's
that's
been like
my soapbox.
forgotten recently is like if we're talking about something that's a human issue, a common defense will be you're being political
Yeah.
and not actually addressing the human root issue that's hurting people.
Yeah. I mean, I taught English for a little while, as I was saying, and one when I was teaching Catcher in the Rye. Um, like one of the things when I read it the first time when I was in high school, I absolutely hated Catcher in the Rye. I'm like, who is this white boy complaining, like wealthy white boy complaining about whatever he's complaining about? But then when I read it as an adult, as someone who was really questioning gender, who was really learning a lot about my gender, so one of the things I found interesting was there's a lot of his attempts at performing masculinity that really underlie a lot of his anxieties. And so that was one of the ways that I taught it, like one of the lenses through which I taught it. And that was something that was viewed as political, right? And I was just like, okay. So I don't know how to teach then without being political, and I don't know how
Yeah.
to coach then without being political because why can't we dissect the world through all these different lenses and that's why I coach swimming.
This may be a political statement I'm about to say, but I feel like if both sides of the political spectrum stopped wasting so much time fighting with each other and just talked and focused on like base human needs and base human issues that are hurting people of any political type, then it would just end up being like a net benefit for everyone.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, we need to find our mutual humanity. And I think that that has actually been one of the beautiful things about the student encampments that are happening right now. Um, that are not that parts of it that are not, unless you go and seek out the information, that are not being put forward. They're celebrating Shabbat at encampments. They're celebrating different faiths. They have different prayer hours. They are participating in collective care and communal care. And making art together and doing all these things and really recreating a mini like little society.
Yeah.
And that is really being overlooked, is that these are opportunities for us to come together and to find that mutual ground, and that um we can we can coexist in really really beautiful ways. And it's been so gratifying to see, like the encampment at Chapman. I saw that on today's schedule they had Shabbat listed, and I thought that I just think that that's really beautiful, like that that even within what is being viewed as this very complex and un that polarizing
Yeah.
conflict, um we're seeing collaboration and care and love, and that is something that we should be highlighting, and finding that mutual humanity and finding solutions that, like you're saying, recognize that we are just humans, and let's take care of one another and love one another. And that's why authenticity is one of the four pillars of my program. You should be able to be your authentic true self and know that you are going to be loved and respected for it on the pool deck, that you belong on this pool deck as much as anybody else, as your truest self. Yeah, well, even if you do just a little clip of something or whatever from our conversation, I look forward to seeing it. And
Oh
thank
yeah,
you
there'll
so
be
much.
clips posted. Like it'll be up on my Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Well, make sure to tag me. Thank you
I
so much.
will.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too.